Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Western PA Continuum of Care Coordinated Entry Training. We are going to go ahead and get started. Today's going to be broken down into a couple pieces. The first part, we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation by Javon Clark from LCAP. She's going to go ahead and go through a PowerPoint to talk about FAQs, system policies, hit some high notes about the great things that we've been doing with the coordinated entry system, because everybody's been doing a fantastic job getting involved in this complex process. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll talk about some HMIS upgrades or some specific system features that we've recently put into the system to make sure everybody can get a demo of them and kind of take a look firsthand of how to best use them to manage the prioritization list. The training is being recorded, so we will have that available afterward. And I guess we will go ahead and pass it off to Javon, who has her screen shared, to begin the PowerPoint.
Hello, everyone. Like Brian had mentioned earlier to you all, today we're just going to have a quick overview and answer some of these frequently asked questions that you all had relating to the coordinated entry system and the processes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to take a minute to introduce this concept, this training concept. We would like to start hosting monthly training on coordinated entry system, introducing new updates, changes to policies, etc., using this allotted time. So the next training that we're going to offer will be on Thursday, March 19th, and then every third Thursday thereafter. So you see I have listed each of the trainings that we have reserved for this training class. So some of the training topics, again, that we'll review, we'll continue to do frequently asked questions. We'll show you any new upgrades made to the system, any policy items, new and or existing, that need some clarification or just to shed some light on some of the policy issues, concerns, and then any new other developments that we have as we continue to implement this process. So our training objective for the classes will be to just offer support to all of the system users through this development and the initial implementation phase of coordinated entry. Can you all see my screen? No? I don't think my screen's changing. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Got it. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce this. It's a feedback and questions form. It's in draft form right now, and it still has to go through the committee to tie up any loose ends. You know, there may be a few additional pieces added to this feedback and questions form. So soon we will roll it out to the entire continuum for use. And I'll just bring it up real quick here so we can take a look at it. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the HUD exchange where you can go and ask questions and find answers. So if we went here, I'm going to type in my name and my email address, enter my phone number, and then the agency that I work for. And then the role here is, you know, your role with the coordinated entry system. So I'll just say coordinated entry subcommittee member, or lead agency. And then, so I'm coming to this portal and I have some feedback or I have a question that is related to community engagement. So by selecting this option here, I can choose, whether or not I want to request advertisement for my county, or if I want to share a success story that's happening in my county, or if you've heard from the grapevine there's some community engagement or a good training resource that you wanted to share through the CSC, you can, add that information here, and then you would type the feedback or the question down here. You're also able to upload documents by selecting this option and uploading the document. If you had any training requests, you could start here and you can tell us a little bit more about your training request. So are you requesting a comprehensive system training for a new user? Are you looking just to cover the coordinated assessments? Do you want more information on how to pull reports? Or is it just going over the prioritization list and all the functions and responsibilities with managing the list? So these are some of the options here as far as training request goes, and I'm sure this list will get developed as we continue to go through the process. And then down below here, it just wants to know, this feedback or this question will impact who. And this will also help us to direct the questions to the appropriate person or group. So that's why we put that information in here. And then this is where you would just tell us briefly, just a subject line, what your question or feedback is relating to, and then the area to type away into to tell us what the concern is. And then if by hitting submit, that would come to the LCAP office, and then we would direct your questions, your answers, as need be to the correct group or person. This JOT form, once it is fully ready for implementation, will be placed on the COC webpage for access for use. So I just wanted to roll that out. I'm excited about the form. I think it'll help our process and communication as we go along. So just to review some achievements that we have made as a COC, we currently have 35 active assessment centers. We're able to report that we're fully covered, which means that there's at least one assessment center operating in our 20-county region. We have approved policies and procedures. Current funders using the list, we have COC, ESG, DV, and veteran providers pulling from our prioritization list. There are currently 127 coordinated entry system users, and we have 490 active records on our prioritization list. 12 domestic violence assessment partners who are actively using the list. And we have, as far as list management goes, which I know Brian wants to shed some more light on, 19 days, 19 average days for updating the list, which I think is amazing, and we've come a long way since operation in December, becoming operating as of December 11th. So that's just a little achievement that I wanted to highlight. Brian, did you have some you also wanted to share with us, statistics?
Yeah, I would say, well, I looked up some just some statistics, and just from the prioritization list. Since we've started, we've had over 1,500 people placed on the prioritization list throughout, you know, since we began in early 2017, which is a lot of people gone through the assessment centers and gone through the process. We have housed over 500 of those individuals, you know, placed them directly into permanent housing. You know, we've
Awesome. And then I forgot to mention the 120 days for that is currently the average days homeless. That's what it's reporting for the list, which I think is pretty good, being that our strategic plan, I believe the goal is falling under the 90 days average for being homeless. So we're at 128. We have a little ways to go, but that's not bad. Good job, everyone.
Yep, and sorry I got cut off there. I accidentally muted myself. But then there was another 121 people that either remained in current housing in their current apartments or were placed in the new housing. So that's a total of 500 plus people that have entered the system, even in just the past year, that have been placed into permanent housing. So I think that's a pretty good job for the first year of the process.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll jump right into the frequently asked questions that we're going to review for this afternoon. So the first question is, who should complete the coordinated assessment? So currently we're asking that all homeless households defined by HUD requesting housing assistance to be assessed and properly added on the housing prioritization list to become eligible to receive CSB, ESG, RRH, and some veteran housing services. How to determine consumers' pre-screening category. So by selecting literally homeless, so there's 3 entry points for the pre-screening categories. We have, are you literally homeless? Are you at risk of becoming homeless? And is anyone in your home making you feel unsafe? So the clients are going to enter coordinated entry based off of these 3 key areas. So by selecting literally homeless, that client will meet Category 1 of the HUD's homeless definition. And then if your client that you're serving meets the at-risk of homeless, the Category 2 homeless definition, then those individuals would then be placed on, or an assessment would be conducted and go through coordinated entry. And Category 2 would go through that, are you at risk for becoming homeless? So these individuals would have, will imminently lose their primary nighttime residency within 14 days, and that there's no subsequent residence that has been identified for the individual. So we do want to get assess these individuals and get them prioritized for services. One, just to make sure that that they're on our radar, and that we can start looking at seeing what funding we have available to service the client. So entry into the DVACs, the consumer must be homeless and DV. So if you answer yes to this, is anyone in your home making you feel unsafe or afraid, the system's going to automatically stop the assessment and ask for the assessment staff to refer to the local DVAC. And that DVAC would determine if the consumer meets HUD's homeless definition, and then add them to conduct the assessment and add them to the prioritization list if they meet the criteria. So what type of housing situations qualify for coordinated entry? So you'll notice, and I'm going to switch my screen here. One second. So you'll notice under the homeless assessment screen, there is the homeless grid that you all are recording the client's homeless episodes. So when you select this drop-down arrow, it gives you 4 categories that you can select that would best describe that client's homeless situation. So you'll either select place not meant for human habitation, emergency shelter, safe haven, or interim housing is an option. So once you select place not meant for human habitation, we also want to know like the exact location or the description of the location. So you could put a specific street there, or that they lived in their car, or some other place not meant for human habitation listed here. You could also write emergency shelter, and some of the categories or housing situations that you may want to list under emergency shelter would be congregate shelters, transitional housing, hotel or motel paid for by charitable organizations, or temporary housing that's under 7 days. So those specific housing situations you would want to categorize under emergency shelter, and then again you have your safe havens and interim housing. And there's a little note here. So exits from, so also we do want to know individuals who have exited from institutions where the consumer resided 90 days or less, because they still would maintain their homeless status. So we're not going to enter the institution per se, capture that information in the homeless grid, but rather where they stayed prior to entering that institution. So it would be either categorized as, you know, we'll list the emergency shelter or the place not meant for human habitation. I did want to clarify that. So we've been getting a lot of questions related to interim housing. So what does interim housing mean? And the definition that we have found for interim housing and how we're using interim housing currently is, so when adding interim housing to the homeless history grid, the individual should be, individual should be chronically homeless, or the household should be chronically homeless. They should have accepted a unit or voucher for permanent housing, and then, you know, once that has occurred, there is some sort of situation that prevents the household from moving immediately into housing. So the apartment may be getting painted, there's a tenant that's moving out, etc. There's many reasons why, you know, that could prevent a client from moving immediately into housing. But we know that client needs sheltered for that night. So that's when, you know, the provider would determine and allow for a temporary solution for shelter until the client is able to move in. So that's interim housing and how we're using it. It is not intended to record friend stays or doubled up situations, nor jail or institution stays. Okay, so we have a little pop quiz. Okay. So do these households qualify for coordinated entry? And how would we list the following scenarios in the homeless history grid? So let's review scenario A, and I'll give you all a couple moments to look it over before we get started. Okay, so again, do these households qualify for coordinated entry? So that's the first part of the question. So scenario A, is Stephanie Paypatch on the line? No, she might have got pulled out.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to see if she could answer any of these questions for us. So scenario A, emergency shelter. First thing I wanted to note is when we are updating the homeless grid, we've noticed the dates. What we would like to see is that the most recent date is added to, the most recent homeless episode is added to the grid first, and then we go down from there. So you'll notice here the emergency shelter stay is listed first because it is the most recent homeless episode of this client. So then would the emergency shelter situation be captured in coordinated entry? And this specific instance would get captured in the coordinated entry, so we would go on ahead and note that those dates. But then when we go down, the consumer tells us that they stayed at that they've had some couch hopping history and they've stayed at friend A house and and another friend's house. So I wanted to see, maybe throw this question out to one of the participants to see if we should, what they feel as far as should this information be recorded into coordinated entry. I don't know if someone wants to answer the question.
Would you want me, right now everybody's muted, you want me to unmute everybody?
Sure.
All right. I don't know. Okay, everyone's unmuted. If you're not answering, you might want to mute yourself on your side. Okay.
She doesn't.
Or at least that's what it used to be. It means you run a couple more programs, so of course there'll be more than that, but I can system with
All right, we do have an answer from someone through the chat. They said no, they are couch serving, and HUD doesn't count that.
Different.
So I put Jeff on my health insurance, so he's already on the biz end.
All right, so yeah, these clients, these particular friend stays, we could probably mute everyone, Brian.
I gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so these particular stays, you're right. It's over 7 days. Falls outside of the 7-day time frame. So no, we would not add these friend stays to coordinated entry. How about the street scenario? It's a consider a place not meant for human habitation. So then we would go ahead and add that scenario with it being a falling under the HUD's homeless definition. Same with hotel paid for by nonprofit. This friend stay was for almost a month and a day. So again, that's over the time allotted, so we would not add that this incident to coordinated entry, but then the slept in a car episode we would add to coordinated entry. Okay, so looking at scenario B, and this friend stay, let's see, it's from 1/20 to 2/14, which falls outside of the 7-day allowance or time frame for HUD. So we would not record this friend stay under coordinated entry. If it fell within, then we would. As far as the next scenario or situation on the emergency shelter, again, we would record that information, this information in the homeless history grid, and provide the dates that the consumer provided to us. And then friend B and friend C stays, these time frames 110 to 116, I believe that's 10 days, 6 days. And then we would not add those days if they are over the 7-day allotted time frame. And then as far as slept in a car, that episode would get added to coordinated entry. So if we work our way up with scenario B, as you notice, it says slept in a car. This client slept in a car for a year, which would make them chronic. But my specific question to you is this client still currently homeless? So I'll give you a moment to look at the scenario and maybe just answer in the chat box. Is this client still considered chronic?
We have one entry that
the coordinated entry date would have been 2/14/18.
We have one that says no, and another one says the client in scenario B is not considered chronic. Another one says no from the chat.
And I did see a little error. Notice an error. That slept in a car should be listed as 12/1/16, not 12/1/17. I wonder if I can change it real quick. I'm sorry, Brian. Did you say something?
Yeah, I was providing, there's a bunch of people providing answers in the chat. The consensus seems to be they're saying the person in scenario B is not considered chronic.
Yes, that's correct. And they're not chronic because their episodes, there was a break in episodes. So what should we do in this scenario? Scenario A, emergency shelter 2/1/2018 to 3/13/2018. And then the client stayed at a friend's house from 3/14 to present. And the friend notifies the assessment staff that they have to be out in 5 days. Would this client be added to coordinated entry, go through to coordinated entry? We can answer in the chat box. Any answers, Brian?
Yes, just we have a no, and then we have another one that says add to CE, not chronic, but homeless or at risk.
That's correct, yes. So this client would get added to CE, and they would be categorized, or the pre-screening entry that we would use for them is the at-risk entry. So yes, that's correct. And then, so what if the client came in, again, they said that they slept at a friend's house, 3/14 to this present day, and then the client notifies the assessment staff that their friend says that they can stay with them until they find housing. Would this client be added to coordinated entry?
Well, we have one answer. Bill says, well, we have one that says add to CE. Then we have one that says no because they're not at imminent risk of housing or homelessness. And then we have another say they're still at risk. So we have competing answers.
Yes, they still may be at risk. That's correct, but for the purposes of coordinated entry and the subcommittee deciding to only admit homeless clients who meet HUD's homeless definition, this client we would not add to coordinated entry because their situation is not imminent. They're not stating that they have to be out within that 14-day time frame. So we would not add this client to coordinated entry. Now, if that situation did change and they notified the assessment staff, we could always add them back in. But at this current moment, we would use our diversion strategies to divert this consumer from entering coordinated entry and refer to the appropriate agencies in our community. So this last question just states real quick, and then what happens if weekly case conferencing reveals clients has continued to reside with friends beyond 14 days? So the client comes in, we put them through to coordinated entry because they originally said that they had to be out within 5 days, and then during your case conferencing sessions that you had, you found that the client still remains with the consumer beyond the 14-day time frame. What should we do? And currently, you know, the process that we're using is we should close this client's record and place them on the historical list because they're not meeting the definition for homeless. These individuals would be inactivated and placed on the historical list. Are there any questions before we move on, Brian?
No, you're good. No questions.
Thank you. So how many days must a provider wait to receive a response from a consumer before permitted to move to the next person in line on the prioritization list? And currently, the rule of thumb is that we must allow at least 3 business days to receive an acceptance or declining response before the provider can move to the next person in line on the housing prioritization list. All attempts to collect a response, we are encouraging that this information be noted in a coordinated intake note. And that responses can be made by the organizational staff or consumer, by the organizational staff working with the consumer or the consumer. So what is the process for filling dedicated chronic beds? Okay, so we are using, we are referencing the current policy, the current COC policy for filling permanent supportive housing, the chronic policy. So when a new unit becomes available or an existing unit is ready to be turned over, we will report to coordinated entry. No longer are we using the emails to send out this information, but we'll just simply report to coordinated entry, and we will enter the different search filters. So you'll see in this just quick screenshot of coordinated entry that I went in and I added some search filters. So the list type I selected as all types to make sure that we find all eligible candidates, homeless candidates, and then I went and I put in the service need as permanent supportive housing. And the county that I have an opening in is Lawrence County, so I put in that filter, and then I selected the chronically homeless subpopulation subfilter here, and that brought up two results that I could begin to call first, choosing selecting the client with the highest CE screening score first. So we'll go to the list and we'll search our county, our service area first. If no chronically homeless individuals present in our area at the time of our search, then the second step would be to look at homeless individuals in the entire CSC and reach out to chronic homeless households registered on the prioritization subpopulation list. So I'll pull that up really quick. I'm going to go on my list, go to the list, and put in my filters. I'm on step 2. I didn't find anyone in Lawrence County that was eligible or that wasn't in processing. So I'm going to go in the list and I'm going to search all available counties. So I'm not going to select a specific county here. I'm going to leave that option open. And then I'm going to select chronically homeless. And there are 19 results that are showing there. So this is the list that I'm going to pull from. If you have any other program requirements, such as this unit is for families only, you could go to the screening type option here on the menu option and press that arrow, select sort ascending, and you'll see family pops up, and it's prioritized when it pops up, populates here. And this first client, this would be the first client that I would reach out to. She has a score of 190. She's still in reviewed status. So she's not in processing. If she was in processing, we would not reach out to her, as long as there was no questions. So this client, I would first go to her intake notes and look and see if there are any concerns, or just get a little feel for what's going on with that client, and then reach out to her to see if she would be interested in relocating to my county. And then if I had 2 beds available, I would go down to the next person on the list, which is Tracy Gallo. She's placed in processing. So again, I would review the intake notes, and as long as there's no questions or no red flags that you have, we don't just want to skip over anyone, but if there's no red flags, then go on and move to the next person. But if you are questioning whether or not that person should be in processing, since we are in the initial stages, the development stage of coordinated entry, I would double check. So this would probably be an individual that I would reach out to the provider, just to make sure, which is Union Mission, just to make sure that this client is in fact in processing. But that's, if you were looking to fill one of your chronic spots for an individual, again, you can sort here, and then select the individual with the highest rating and work your way down. Best practices, if you find someone who you contact and you find out that they are not truly chronic, the committee has said from the beginning that this is a shared responsibility. The system is a shared responsibility of all parties. So if we find firsthand that the individual is not chronic, we can go in and update that in the system. And then notify the assessment staff of that update, just so that they are made aware as well. And then the third step, if no chronically homeless individual family is identified within 7 days of the vacancy, the project can then fill the bed with the next highest priority person. Tying in CE, this is the current policy, but if we're tying in CE, it would have to be based on the CE scoring. So just remember that. I think this is the last slide that I have, or well, last question that I have. So my client is no longer interested in relocating. How to update the county selection? So when you add, and I'm going to switch screens one last time. So if we find out that a client is no longer interested in relocating, we can go and review their prioritization list record, and we can update the county selection on their record. So here. So if I come in contact with a client, originally they were placed on the list and they were interested in moving to Butler County, but when I called the consumer to check on their eligibility or start that process, and they state to me that they are not willing to reside in my community, then I could simply go to the client's record and deselect Butler County as an option. And by deselecting, there would, this line doesn't have anywhere. And by deselecting, there would basically be a green arrow, and then I would deselect the individual. So there would be no arrow showed next to the client. It doesn't have to be the assessment staff that makes the switch, but I would again just notify the assessment staff that the update was made if you find that information out. I feel like this would would help speed our processes up a little, not a lot, but a little faster if we were updating the available county. Also, just to point out, there is a new map here, which I know Brian's going to go over it. But we can, if we select this map, it was requested at the last committee meeting that this be something that assessment staff can review with their clients. Just they may not realize, the distance if they, you know, lived in Greene County and they selected Potter as an option, they may not realize the distance. So, you know, the assessment staff, we can help, you know, help that client make wise decisions as far as relocation goes. And then there was just a few clarifications. I have two more slides, few clarifications. The first one is related to the DV policies or procedures. At all times, general sites, we should refrain from updating DV client records, including adding CE notes and changing statuses. The list management of DV records will be completed only by the assessing DVAC. And then personal identification information of an identified DV client should never be disclosed in an email. And during case conferencing, during your case conferencing or your list management sessions, the DVAC, it was recommended that the DVAC identify and delete duplicate records. So if they find that they notice that a client is on the list as a general client, but they are also in their shelter, they're currently serving that client, the DVAC would then delete the general site record, and that client would then just be anonymous. And then as far as the missing, there were a few concerns with missing. So missing chronically homeless individuals / families, they will remain on the prioritization list indefinitely as missing until located and or housing need redetermined. And then for our non-chronic individuals, these clients should remain on the list for at least 6 months and then placed on the historical prioritization list by selecting the closed status option within the consumer's prioritization record if we are unable to locate. Those were two clarifications, and again, you can check out the latest FAQs on the Pennsylvania COC web page. And then if there are additional questions, you know, feel free to send them my way. But that's all I have. Thank you for listening. I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to take us through, he's going to show us some new upgrades that he has been working on and building into the system.
Okay, thank you, Javon. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Now, this is basically the 4 recent upgrades that we've done, at least the first 3, and then we're also going to cover the service acceptance function that's been in the system but is important to the process, so we do want to review that with some other things. Most of the stuff will be the prioritization list management that list. So let's start. What I'm actually going to start with is and what I'm going to do is start with a placement onto the prioritization list. Just to start there, and we'll put a person on the list, and we can kind of go through the process, the new feature with this person. On the training, and I'm going to go ahead and hit place the list, which going to take you the process. Once you've done the initial intake, this will be the final step. As it comes in, it's going to have a name. One thing I do want to mention is, and I know this, a lot of people have asked this, this is one of the reasons I'm going through the placement, is household members. By default, when you an intake and you're going through the coordinated coordinated assessment screening, and you come to the section where you can pick individual or family. If you pick a family, then it asks you to put in the family members. If you do that, when you are doing a prioritization placement, you want to make sure that you come in and select the household members. This person is actually a single, but if this person did have a household member, they would be shown here, so they don't get added automatically. It allows in case people leave or there are changes to the household makeup. We wanted to be flexible that way, so you want to make sure that you do include household members when you add the prioritization record. And you can also edit that once you put them on the list, which we'll show. The services, referral services, which right now we are selecting all by default. Then we've got the homeless category, category 1 or 2, and that is on their HUD housing status. Then you have available counties, and you can pick one or more. Particularly pick the ones that the household is more comfortable being served in, which is probably going to be, you know, the home county of the assessment center, maybe another county down there. And we do have this Western COC map. This is also available while you're doing the placement. So if you are working with the client in real time, you can always pop this up to give a general sense of the case and way to help with these available counties. As you and as Javon showed, you can actually change these and actually most of this information once they're on the list. Now, the other thing I want to talk about down here is provider, because I know things have moved more toward everybody's looking first at their clients within their county. This provider is basically linked to your own county. So I know a lot of people have a single provider, which is basically your agency itself. So that will default. But there are certain organizations that have multiple providers, and that's usually in the situation where they serve multiple counties. You know, they might have a county or a providing arm in Washington County and then another one in Westmoreland or one in Greene and Armstrong. This is where you can actually select the provider that's actually placing them. And that will be important later on because we've added the new filters for originating or placing provider in county. So I wanted to point that out as well. Once those are done, you can hit place and a client will be placed on the prioritization list. Now, all the prioritization list is within the provider tab within HMIS, kind of broken up within the tabs. You'll do most of the intake within the client tab, and of course the provider tab is where all of the prioritization lists are. And as soon as you come in here, depending on your permissions, which I believe we have almost every organization in the Western COC set up to access the prioritization list. You're going to have a folder here called Western Prioritization List, and when you actually click on it, it will open up and it will show you 4 options. The first is actually the prioritization list, and then you've got your 3 reports, and we'll cover especially the details one in a little bit. So we go ahead and hit the prioritization list, and this is where John was talking about. You have all your filters and everything to enter to find specific clients on that list. Now I'm actually going to go to the one that I just entered. I'm going to enter him by name because I do want to show you a couple of the new updates that we recently talked about or showed on the list. Now, to go into a client record, you've got review prioritization list, and that's where you do most of the updating within the system, and it takes you to pretty much the same screen as the placement, where you can also add and update household members, referral services, as well as updating their homeless category, available categories, as was mentioned before. One part that we have here is the status, and this is with the reset days in status. Basically, the days count off based on the last time the status was set to something new. So even if you come in here at new and you would hit save, since the status didn't change, your days in status wouldn't change either. Is everybody, through the chat, can you guys still hear me? Okay. Just making sure. I had a couple of people say they couldn't hear me. Okay. With the status itself, there's two ways to reset the days in status. The first is to completely change the status setting as, from what it was before. I'm going to try to take it off speaker to see if that helps with the sound breaking out. With the status, to reset the days in status, you can completely change it from one to the other. So basically, when you hit save, if the status is different than what it was when you went in, the days in status will be reset. The new feature that we've added is specifically for the statuses that might not change, such as like reviewed or even in processing. We have added a reset days in status. And this is a way to manually force reset this days in status, basically back to zero. And the situations where this will be useful is you're supposed to reset the statuses or look at those statuses that are over 7 days. You could have someone that is at a review status and maybe they're over 7 days or at 8 or 9 days. You go in and review them. You update a coordinated intake note with, information that you reviewed them. But without changing the status, you don't want to change it because it's still, you want to leave it on reviewed. There was no way to show or reset that you had actually, a review had been performed. So if you're not changing the status, you actually did a review that warrants set, you can check this box and the system will automatically reset the days in status. What it will also do is, and it's the same rules as when changing the status initially, if you change the status, it requires you to enter in a coordinated intake note. Same thing with this new force reset option. So if you choose to force reset it and basically say, hey, I don't want to change the status, but I do want to reset the days because I'm looking over them, you will also need, the system will ask you to enter in a coordinated intake note for that day as well. So that is a good feature to have in the system to basically allow you guys to keep with your timing of every 7 days to try to keep on top of the people that you're reviewing and who needs to be reviewed. Okay, going to the second one, placing county provider for prioritization list. That's kind of what we talked about from the beginning when we did the placement, is depending on the provider that you chose when you place the client, that client will be associated with that provider going forward. And that's regardless of what available county they're put in. It's kind of a way for providers or assessment centers to do intakes put clients on the list, but also track those specific clients going forward. A couple things that we have added recently new is at the end of the list for every client, we have actually added in the placing county, placing provider, and placing user options. So that will basically go off the provider that was selected, and of course the county the provider is attached to, and whatever user actually performed that action. Now what we've also done, and along with the ability to sort any one of these fields that has these little triangles up here, you are also able to sort these fields as well. So if you want to sort it, you know, it also works with these filters as well. You can use these to sort or group your clients together as well. Now, what we've also done is we've placed filters up here, placing county and placing provider, where you can also filter the list with that information. So if you want, you know, Butler County, it will show all the persons placed by providers within Butler County. And then when you go to the Butler County, it will actually, you know, depending on your county you select, it will actually provide the specific counties that are underneath or within that specific county. That's right, because I have John there. So as we can see here, we've got Clearfield County, and we've got 40 total persons under Clearfield. And then we can look at the individual Clearfield providers as well. And that's helpful for, you know, those individual providers to go in and check their clients. We also added a refresh list button up here. And what this does is, I know sometimes when you get into a lot of filters, and it's specifically with the subpopulation one, sometimes if you click multiple filters at the same time, a lot of times the screen will refresh on you. So you want to be careful when you're selecting subpopulations to, if you do more than one, kind of select one at a time so the screen refreshes so it keeps it there. That's one of the reasons we did put a refresh list in there. So if you set your filters, you're ready to go, and you want to do one final refresh, you can hit that button up there. It'll completely refresh the list for you, just as if you're entering it, but it'll keep all the filters you've already set. So it's kind of a way to double check to make sure that the list is giving you a match set of clients every time based on your filters. Now, one of the reports, and this kind of goes hand in hand with our second and third new upgrades, with the placing county, also kind of interpreting the prioritization list batch notices. They're both kind of built off a similar report. We actually have a report here called Prioritization List Details. And this is a report that basically can provide you detailed client information. It's kind of a report version of the list itself. So you can show, who's on the list, what services they want, who they came from, their current status. Basically, we provide it in a report that can be printed out and analyzed outside the system. You can pick the date range. We're just going to go ahead with the current month. It's also got other statuses within it. So if you're looking to maybe I just want to look at in processing, or I just want to look at those with the days in status, and this box is days in status over, like 8. So you can go ahead and just choose that, and it'll return all clients that have a days in status over the 7 limit. So it can give you a quick list on that. So there are some filters in there with that. The available counties, Now that's the actual available county that you select when you place them on the list, and it's kind of where they want to go or where they would like to be served from. That is also a filter, as well as the referral services, although we're kind of at this point in time picking all of them so everyone's available for all services. But down here we've added the placement or originating county and provider, and it works much like the filter on the list itself, where you pick a county, and you can just pick a county, or you can pick a county and a provider. And if you pick a county and a provider, basically what it's going to do is provide you a list of all the clients that you have personally placed on the list within a specific time frame. So we're going to go ahead and hit report. Oh, this is the one I actually wanted to do. And when you see a report that comes up and says section has no data, that means there's no clients that fit that specific filter. So this is the report that comes up with the list details, and it's actually the same exact report that goes for the batch notice report that certain persons get every morning from the list. Now, what this actually is it shows individual details of all the clients on the list, and it shows things like age and household size, what their screening date is, what their current status is, what their days in status is, placement information, originally placed, as well as it also provides case management information, and that case management, that is case manager and case contact information that's added when they are placed originally on, so that you can contact them to contact the client. Then, of course, all the offices they have available. And what it is it's grouped by their counties. So as you can see here, a lot of available counties, just group counties together. So there might be some clients that have 18 counties selected and some have 14. So it's best to group like clients with available counties together. Like as you see here, just Lawrence County, there are a bunch of clients that are listed under that county. But since Lawrence is also a part of this client here, it's actually the 8th or 9th county selected because that client said, hey, I can also be served in Lawrence, based on this report as well. And it's a good way to get client information and check off, what their status is, how many days are in their status, to kind of give you, a report understanding of how many clients are on the list, how many in your area, how many did you place, that sort of thing. Now, talking about the prioritization list batches, or the batch notices, what we have the ability to do is set up persons to receive a notice every morning that basically sends you a batch report of all clients that have been added to the prioritization list within or specific county or counties within the last 24 hours. Now, those that have it set up, they should receive an email every morning. I think it actually goes out at night. We run it at 9, 10, 11, 12. We kind of stagger the batch notices during the night. So you'll probably get them in your mailbox in the morning. And what it is it actually is a link because the system doesn't actually send out reports with sensitive information through email. So what it does is it comes out and it gives you a link to the report itself. And by clicking on that link, the system will load the HMIS, and if you're not currently logged in, it'll ask you to log in, put in your credentials, and then it will actually pop up the report itself. Now, if you're already logged in and you click on it, it'll know your credentials, and it'll just pop up the report on the screen. And the report that pops up is exactly this. But what it will show is it will show just those added within your areas, within your county, within the last 24 hours. So it's a way to kind of say, hey, someone was added to the list within, the county that your provider serves within the 24 hours, just to give you an update or a notice that there may be somewhat of interest on the list that you might want to take a look at during your next review, or if you have an opening, here's some clients that you might be able to serve. Now, the notice themselves is based off the available county, so it's the county that the clients want to be served in, not specifically from the provider themselves. So you could be receiving batch notice of clients served and placed by other providers, but those that are, in your county, whether that's a single county or whether it's multiple counties, depending on how your provider region is set up. And that's actually a really good report to run, and it's kind of the mirror, the report version of the list itself that can be really helpful for pulling data, reviewing data to help manage the list. Okay, service acceptance function. Let me look and see if there's any questions. Okay, service acceptance function. Now, this isn't new per se, but this is a function that basically is a way of telling the system, as well as reporting and outcomes, that you are 100% serving this client for this service. So when you're actually, you go through your process, and I'm going to work on John Johnson so I can work on my test client here. Once you've been, working on a client and gone through your reviews and in processing, and you find that, hey, I found a match, I have an opening for this client, and I want to serve them, I want to enroll them into my program, what you should do before specifically, coming here and just placing them or closing them out, what you should actually do before that is down below at the bottom is kind of like a referral service grid. It's kind of shows all their services, as well as it shows any kind of outcomes, any service acceptances that you've had, any services that are provided. You actually have two options down here, referrals and service acceptance. And this is the acceptance that we're talking about. What you should do for that you're serving is click on that button, and it basically walks you quickly through a process that basically allows you to record officially that, hey, I provided this client, this specific service. So you come in and you pick, let's say I'm providing this client with rapid rehousing services. You basically click the rapid rehousing services. You can enter in a result. It's optional, but at this point, since you should only do positive that you're providing the service. Service probably the best result. You enter in the date, and then you just hit accept from list. And at that point, it does things. A, it records the outcome. You know, it says, hey, you know, is absolutely providing John rapid services, as well as you access to the client household. That if your program is an MIS, and you may full open enrollment with the client. Actually, once it's done, it gives you where you can go to the client dashboard. You can actually start an enrollment in the screen from this option here, or you can go to the prioritization list. And we're prioritization list. And I'll go ahead back to Johnson. Do what it looks like. We go back and open up. And as we can see here, now by looking at this client, whether currently and we can actually see that, okay, well, HMI, which is my, agency, for this client, rehab services on this day. So it kind of fill in information for anybody, at it, as well as the service accept, kind of the main thing we look at for in terms of
Brian, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're breaking up just a little.
Okay. Okay. Is this
a little better?
A little better? Okay. So, better spot in the cellular service. Once you service accept that it records, and it also provides kind of the reporting. So we recommend before you close someone that recommend you go in, do a service acceptance, or actually go and close the client. I know it didn't work better. You have, I know people are having some problems with hearing what's going on with that. I don't think speaker is probably not any better. I'm almost done though. With this, done this acceptance when you head and present the client to a post and pick it and support it, rapid rehab, one of the destination placement stations. Once that, it can be moved to historical. The service acceptance is not a new feature in there, but that is something we wanted to cover and to make sure people review this step before they manually or place and cool part of this. That hits the new parts of the trades, or at least that we wanted to hit. I don't think the sound's gotten any better or not.
No, it's not really the sound. It's more just like a connection issue. So we
Gotcha.
caught like every other word. I feel like so it was tough following through.
The whole thing?
Not the whole thing. I'd say more towards like the last 5 minutes maybe of the training.
Okay.
It's when I noticed the connection issue.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's show something else or anything else I was going to. Buddy, any questions? The ones demo or third? You can try to cover that. Yeah, sounds any better? Actually, there's a couple questions here that came up earlier. Someone asked, do we accept the client in one of our programs? The answer is you only accept you are serving the client. It shouldn't be if I'm just looking at the client or just doing an inquiry or a process or, eligibility. It should be if I'm a client into one of the programs, or even if you helping someone and the client is placed into permanent supportive, service program, whether it's transition urgency, but and permanent supportive end up in housing, and you played a part to serve that to record that you help them along in that process. Okay, I don't see any questions here. I don't know if you have anything to add, Javon.
No, I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay.
Thank you for walking us through the new upgrades. And if there's no other questions by the attendees, then I guess we're done for the day.
Okay. Yeah, just a reminder, we are recording this, so I'll get reporting out. I'll get that to Davon as soon as we can get that download converted. And thank you for everyone's. I guess we will see you April 19th at our next training.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.